Hi everyone, welcome to another of our broadcasts. Today we're going to look at the question, why would a loving God send people to hell? In our last broadcast we were thinking about the subject of hell and looking at the question, is it a real place? So people then have asked, surely if God is loving, he would never send someone to hell. It's a question that's been asked many times and it's a good question. There's no doubt that God is loving. The Bible clearly teaches that time and time again. One of the most famous statements in the Bible is God is love. And people then take that and they say, well, if God is love, surely it is unloving to send someone to spend eternity in hell where they're being punished. Well, perhaps an answer to that is this. Just because God is love, it does not mean that he loves everything. Because God is also holy and righteous, we know that he actually hates sin. He hates everything that is evil. He hates all kinds of wickedness. He hates murder. He hates abortion, child abuse. He hates pride and social injustice and sexual immorality of every kind. He hates lying and slander and blasphemy. Think about it. Would it be a loving thing for God to love murder? Would it be a loving thing for God to love child abuse? Of course not. If God were even to be indifferent, apathetic to such things, we would say that such an attitude was wrong. Now, if God were not to punish those who have committed murder, those who have cheated on their wives or on their husbands, and as a result ruined their family life, if God was not to punish the likes of Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin or others who have committed terrible genocide and other atrocities, we would feel a profound sense of injustice and say that's not right. So there's nothing inconsistent with being loving and at the same time being just and punishing wrongdoing. A judge, for example, is not acting in an unloving way in sending a proven child abuser or murderer to jail. Now, of course, we can probably agree in theory with that. The problem comes when we think about those who are being punished but who are not mass murderers, who are not child abusers, who are not drug barons, who are not really, really bad people, but are, for the most part, what we would call decent enough people. They haven't committed awful atrocities. Their sins are what we would say are more common sins, like lying and greed and gluttony and blasphemy and jealousy and pride, those sorts of things. The problem, of course, is God doesn't see these sins as being in any way trivial. To God, all sin is serious. Yes, there are much more serious sins than others, and God will punish sin accordingly, according to its degree of seriousness. But all sin deserves punishment, and all sin will be punished, no matter how trivial that sin is in our eyes. But because God is loving, he has provided a way of avoiding hell. He has sent his dear son, Jesus, to take the punishment for sin for every person who truly repents and trusts Jesus as their Saviour. That, you see, is what was happening on the cross. God was punishing Jesus for the sins of every person that Jesus came to save. And he came to save those who would truly put their trust in him as their Lord and Saviour. Those people will not be punished for their sins because God has punished Jesus for their sins, and he's punished all of their sins in Jesus. That shows us how loving God is, providing a way of avoiding hell at such a great cost to himself. Now think about it. Anyone who refuses God's offer of mercy and his way of escaping hell is not only flying in the face of such amazing love, but also deserves the punishment that they will experience. The only people who are going to be in hell and who are in hell are those who refuse God's offer of heaven on God's own terms. And the big question is, are you going to end up in heaven on God's terms, or are you going to continue on in the pathway that leads to hell? Today, God gives you the opportunity to choose one path that leads to destruction, or the other pathway, the way of escaping hell, that leads to heaven. And that pathway is the pathway of faith in Jesus Christ, God's Son, as your Saviour and as your Lord. Have a good day, folks.